Abu Salah, do you find any exciting news about UFO lately, or?
Just really studying, just getting into the subject a little bit better. Just yeah, kind of the studies a little bit here and there over the place. What I've kind of concentrated on at the moment is the historical interaction between humanity and the jinn, particularly when it comes to religious practices, religious foundations, and that type of thing.
Mhm. Okay. I've seen you post quite a bit about like the relationship between these deities, like not deities, my bad, these entities of jinn and Egyptian gods and like Hindu gods and stuff. And that was quite interesting because me and Isam, we actually discussed this long time ago, and there's a lot of correlation between them. So this is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think historically, if you look back at what I would call like indigenous religions, native religions, animism, spiritualism, I think there is a grain of truth within them, but it's kind
Mhm.
of like you have to have to use what the Quran says, you have to have a furqan by which to
Yeah.
kind of judge it. Once you kind of have your furqan, your criteria to judge accuracy, historical accounts, it makes things definitely a lot more easier. And like I say, and I think one of the things that goes kind of like untapped, like I say, is
Mhm.
native stories and stuff like that. One of the greatest kind of repositories I've found for like maybe a little bit more background history outside of the Quran and the Hadith is Arab folklore. Because the Arabs obviously believed in the jinn before the advent of the Nubuwwah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So it's kind of interesting to see what they had to say beforehand. And you do find that there is a lot of global interconnectivity as well, which is really interesting.
And you know what interesting is that in my reading, what I found is I just did a lot of indigenous uh, what's it called tribes and stuff. They also had similar things. If you look at Latin America, they have a lot of tales or folklores about these beings, but they would worship them, in return. So they would, in return of their freedom, they will worship these beings. And how some of these, I keep forgetting the name of this one entity, or yeah, one entity who they still worship, came from the waters. Came from the waters, and he
Oh,
would
is it? I think
actually,
is it Coetzalcoatl?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's quite
Yeah, that's
interesting,
that's a very, very, very classically. I think it's the feathered serpent he appears as.
Yep, as a serpent or something, right? He,
And
So
what's
sorry, boys.
interesting that
Sorry, just
sorry,
to
go
let you
ahead,
guys
Emma.
know, he said he's in finishing a meeting off, so he'll be in here shortly. But you guys carry on.
okay,
Yeah, I was
sure.
just going to say what's quite interesting is that in the last, I think it was Black Panther film, you had the nation of Atlantis in there
I was about
from
to
the
say that.
water,
Yeah.
and they're interconnected with this god Coetzalcoatl. So you kind of have these connect. Like I say, there is a lot of information to be gained by studying indigenous stories, histories. Like I say, it's just about understanding. For example, here in the UK, they talk about a particular type of jinn that inhabits homes that's called a boggart. That if you're
Mm.
good with it, it does nice things for you. It might cook for you, clean for you. At the end of the day, a boggart is just another word for the jinn. It's just that they don't call it that. But then, if you look at Australia, they talk about their particular deities that are called, and literally they are called the Wajinna, and they look like very typical alien greys.
Interesting. Okay.
I
And
think in Australia as well, they call them the Matagina. They literally have the
No,
same.
it's not. It's not. No, it's Wajinna. Wajinna, the
Oh,
Wajinna
Wajina. Oh,
spirits.
excuse me. But there's a guy.
Yeah.
His name's Mac Tonys. He used the term Matagina, but maybe I misheard him. But you know what he said? Funny enough, in our tradition, we know that the jinn they like to. It's so bizarre. They like to hang around the junkyard or where the people used to dump their rubbish. Yeah, Mac
Mm.
Tonys. He said that one. I mean, of course, we don't know if his experience was, I don't know him. And I haven't done much research. There's not many videos on him, but let's say he's trustworthy. He said that one of the crafts they picked him up in was made from junkyard material, retrieved parts of cars and things like that were fashioned, but the actual what was important was the engine in it was one of their own. So they could. He said that they're really good at building and that they'll recycle things as well. That was his claim. Of course, I don't, God knows best, but I found it quite telling that he said that they hang around junkyards and refuse places where things are dumped and they reuse materials that have been left over. Of course, God knows best, like I said. By the way, those who are turning up just now and seeing the name Rony Vernet in there, he is coming. He's just in a meeting, and hopefully he'll be finished soon, and we'll be bringing him up. So just in case you're thinking, well, why have you got his name there and he's not in the room? But he'll be here soon, hopefully. So a little bit patient. One thing I want to add, sorry, a little bit off topic, but this week I did a bit of catching up, right, with some of the claims that were made, and I found it quite hilarious. There was I can't remember the name of it, but there was like an event that George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell went to, and they brought Dylan Borland up, and they questioned. I don't know if you probably all saw it. Yeah, I'm a bit behind with the news, and so they brought Dylan up, and one of the things that they said. And this was said by Jeremy Corbell. He said he was told by the DIA or whoever the investigator was, who was trying to trap Dylan Borland and get him done for treason. One of the things that was brought up was allegedly on a symbol that was drawn onto one of the alleged recovered power sources for a triangle UFO. On it was a hieroglyphic, and it's been classified. Now, what made me smile about that was the nature of the cover up and the nature of the information surrounding these creatures, the jinn, is highly classified and treated with even if it's something innocuous like a symbol on the side. Like what could you possibly learn from a shape drawn onto the side of something? Yeah, they treat it with the utmost security, with threats of treasonous behavior if you draw that image and show people what's drawn on the side of it. And this is why what made me really chuckle the most was also this week I noticed a lot of people are talking about particularly religious religious ideas being mixed with ufology. Some people say it kind of they show that it kind of leaves a bad taste in their mouth. Yet when it comes to religious texts and particularly monotheistic religions, very open. The prophets were not secretive. They never hid the information and said this is secret from God. Well, yet they tried to say that what's happening with UAP and UFOs is the same creature that approached the prophets. Why is it that one is highly secretive, so much so that a symbol on the side of something is classified at the maximum level of national security, yet what the prophets came with was very open, very honest? This is, and I know it may seem a bit confusing what I'm trying to say here, but just to clarify, the whole nature of UAP, UFOs, these creatures and all of the information surrounding them is highly secretive. And behind this secrecy is this creature, just my opinion. I think that part of the secrecy and why you have this cross, what seem like two countries that are against each other, like Russia and America and China, why none of them have made an open disclosure is because they're being asked to keep this secret by the very creature, by the nature of the creature themselves. They want this secrecy. They don't want to be unmasked in front of the world as yet, right? So that's why you have this, everybody kind of keeping mum's the word, as they say, keeping stumm, not opening their lips and talking about it, because it's coming from the phenomena itself, and so much so that they're classifying symbols on the side. This is nothing like what the prophets came with. This is a completely different thing, and you can see that in these type of interactions that we have. I get it when you're classifying things that could be dangerous, or how to design something that could harm somebody else. I get that. Like, this makes sense. Certain knowledge can't be given to everybody, and this is just logic, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to classify things like symbols, this shows that over secrecy, over classification of information, and it's a far cry from the truth and the justice of religion in general, what we see, and it's a massive deviation, and it's nothing that it's this whole, what's the right way of saying it? This whole method of control is completely different than the beauty that came with, the messages that the prophets came with, of justice, of truth, of honesty. And they would say things that seemed strange. Some people rejected it. Why should we believe you? Really, God is sending messages to you, and the angels are real? People used to reject it. I get that, but whatever they spoke and they preached, it came with open and honest, and they didn't hide anything. So I know I changed the topic a little bit there,
No, no,
but I
that
wanted
was
to
actually
mention
good.
that.
I think that was pretty good, spot on. Because if you look at like Diana Pasolga, she does talk about it, and I feel like even these symbols or those crafts itself, they're worshiping these things. Like that's pretty strange to me. And like most of these people, most likely don't believe in a god, but when it comes to UFOs, UAP, like they are willing to put that aside and do some rituals, right? Like Farooq, I think you know about it. You have talked about this quite a lot, but to me, it's really strange that these symbols mean something to them, and there's so much secrecy behind it. So yeah.
Yeah, I find
even
it bizarre.
even the symbols themselves, like you keep, I guess, seeing the same link to Egypt, Egyptian hieroglyphs. Similar things were mentioned about the Roswell craft and panels with hieroglyphs on them, or hieroglyph-like text or writing. Even in the Rendlesham case, there were strange symbols, and I believe some have sort of suggested that they looked like hieroglyphs, etc. So it's a common theme, it seems like.
It also creates this secrecy. It creates desire. I remember, like, when you see kids, if one of them picks up like this little pebble and he flicks it in the air and he catches it, yeah, that other boy, a boy who sees it, is like, I want a pebble to flick in the air and catch, yeah. And I kind of get the same feeling as that like this deliberate over classification creates this air of mystery that gets everybody all riled up. Like Jeremy Corbell, the preamble before he revealed this information was 30 minutes. The guy was sitting. He said, I'm going to tell you something, right? And he went here and he went there with it, and he ducked and he dived and he went in and out, and then eventually he said he built it up a lot, and then he said there were three things, that was allegedly that Dylan allegedly revealed in a skiff to the DIA or whoever this investigator was, and this investigator was asking Jeremy, did it? One of the things was he drew the craft. The other thing was that he allegedly drew the symbol, and it was on the side of the craft. And the third thing was he named the program Project Rubik's Cube, I believe it was called. Yeah. So this whole thing, this was a massive drop for UAP UFO. Yet what do we really get from that? That there is a name of a program, and that allegedly a symbol was on the side of a power source. Really and truly, ultimately, it's not much, yeah. But for people who are following a topic, it's a big revelation. Oh, that we've got a name. We can do follow up. You look it up. There's not much on there, and there's not much information. But this secrecy, this little drabs of information, it gets people excited and listening and following. And I feel that this is very, very deliberate, and I don't like it. I don't like the way that it's done. I'm not blaming Dylan, by the way. I think that he seems to be a very honest man. What you see is what you get with him. He's not dramatic in any way that I could tell. He did seem very uncomfortable while he was up there. He's lost like, from what we can tell and what we've been told, he's lost a lot, man, and gone through a lot with coming out with this stuff. And I think Rony tonight when he comes up, and people who've dealt with the occult and trying to out some of the things that these occultish groups get up to, it can get very dangerous. And I believe that ufology is just a branch, a deeper, more sinister branch that's related to the technology that comes with the occult, right? So, you know, I get why Dylan and people have lost their lives. They've talked about that. I think his name's Matthew Sullivan, who lost his life recently, who was going to come out as a whistleblower. So definitely it's dangerous. Like I don't want to reduce, you know, or make light of what they've done. But I think that deliberately trying to create this mystery and building it up, I don't think it's necessary. I think we need to be a bit more pragmatic about it, and also look at like what was revealed. We got a name and we got a symbol. Like, doesn't really push forward anything. Whether that leads to something down the line, I don't know. But even if we had the symbol, what are we going to benefit from it? Like if I drew now a scribble and said that was it, like, what would people, you know, maybe some people would take it and say this was what was on the side and try to figure out, you know, it had 2 right angles on it and, you know, a 90 degree, 60-degree bend or curve. What are we going to do? You know, but this is the nature, and this is what this creature, I believe, wants. It wants this secrecy. It wants to build this anticipation and desire to know more about them and to seek them. And I think it could backfire on us, definitely. Go on, sorry, Abu Salahuddin.
Yeah, subhanAllah, jazakallah khair. Yeah, this idea of kind of like secrecy as power, this is something you're going to find in a lot of what we call like the mystery schools, the mystery religions. A couple of years ago, I was doing some kind of like in-depth investigation into kind of the ancient Egyptian religion. And you find even within the ancient Egyptians, particularly, like there was a lot of this secrecy amongst the priesthood. So kind of like if you went in at level 1, this symbol meant this, and then you got to level 2 and it means this. But then eventually kind of like what it means is you're sort of like putting into little different compartmentalizing information, control of information. And that's what this is all really down to at the end of the day. It's about controlling people, the masses. And like you say, there's that degree of mystery that just, and this is something very interesting. And it was kind of like just examining into like the Bigfoot case. It's like Bigfoot gives you enough to glimpse them, but not enough to photograph them, to get imagery that would really give that decisive evidence that we, and that's kind of like what the shayateen seems to be doing. It's just, I'm just going to tease you, but tease you enough that keeps you kind of in the loop, that your life gets consumed by this stuff. And then you forget that there's a whole life outside of there. And we do know some people literally, it can drive them crazy.
I see this as the same as downloads. Like these are little, imagine like you're, like, as a modern society, yeah, let's say we go to North Sentinel Island now, and we don't have the same sort of what's the right word? We don't have the same issue of meeting with new tribes, yeah. And we go in there, and we're teaching them very basic engineering principles. To us and them, the difference is massive, and they're gonna, you know, hanker after everything that we do and listen to everything we say because of the power. I'm just presenting a scenario. I'm not saying in reality this would happen. It's more likely we get spears chucked at us and eaten like what happened to the last bloke who tried to go over there. But just hypothetically in this situation, it would create this, you know, master servant type situation. And I kind of feel that's what's happening with downloads. That's what's happening in these programs. This is an absolute desire and wish to maintain supremacy among the elites and among specifically among the national security and defense intelligence. They want to, you know, be the supreme power on this planet. Yeah. So if this creature said hop on one leg, yeah, and headbutt the wall, some guy will try it. If it gets the results, the British, the Americans, the Russian, they're going to try it, right? Well, it said eat 10 tons of apple pie. Some guy would sit down with a spoon and give it a shot. Yeah, this is, I think, the type of dynamic we've got going on here. So a little tidbit, a little download, little bit of information comes through, and the defense intelligence are all over it. We've spoke before about this, but one guy I spoke to, he's on Twitter. He's a very nice guy from the UK, but he told his story. He had an experience, right, and it was related to the lady. And he said that, you know, not long after putting his story up online, this was years and years ago before, you know, the topic became as popular as it is today. Someone from the intelligence community sought him out and wanted to know more and got him to do certain things, certain rituals, to get in contact with the lady and to ask particular questions of the lady relating to engineering things. And he said it was very bizarre. Because it indicated to him that they actively hunt experiencers, not because the experience is special. It's simply that they may be able to provide a clue or piece of information for a problem they're working on in some lab somewhere. And that's all they looked at him as. And as soon as they realized that, you know, nothing further developed from his experiences and he didn't have another one, they kind of left him in the lurch and didn't get back to him. So again, this situation of creating the mystery and giving tidbits is building up for this, you know, two group situation. You got the master, you got the servant, and among the servants, you got the people who will do anything to succeed and become supreme. And then I think you've got another branch who perhaps are a bit more reserved and a bit more careful. So anyway, I know this isn't the topic we're talking about. Imran, is our friend Ronnie here?
He's just messaged again. He's going to be here in about 3 or 4 minutes, hopefully.
Cool. So I'm going to go quickly run and pick up my daughter. I'll be back shortly, yeah? But I'll still remain in the room, but I won't be able to speak. So I'll catch up with you guys later, and hopefully I got some sort of conversation going, yeah?
Well, I have a safe drive. We'll see you in a bit. Yeah. Let's just wait, guys, just a few more minutes, and it'll be an interesting conversation. Till then, Imran or Abusal, if you guys have something on your mind, we can definitely discuss, share some thoughts.
Yeah, we could use it to kind of plug the program that we're going to be doing tomorrow on YouTube. Hopefully, really would encourage everybody to tune in. We're going to be doing kind of like a deep dive into the enigma that is Skinwalker Ranch, kind of looking at it from an Islamic perspective, and seeing kind of like what information aligns with what we know from the activity, essentially the agenda of the satanic jinn, how that manifests in Skinwalker Ranch. But we'll probably also have a look at a couple of other places around America that are very, very similar, kind of highlighting quite a few things that are really interesting. Particularly a couple of ranches called Blind Frog Ranch. There's the Bradshaw Ranch. There is Stardust Ranch. There is Rocky Mountain Ranch. And there's also another place in Southern America called The Project. I found out about recently. There's a really good documentary about it on Amazon Prime. So if you've got it, please do have a look at it, everybody. It's a really interesting documentary. And all of these places kind of exhibit that very typical Skinwalker Ranch activity. So yeah, myself, Imran, Farouk are going to do a deep dive into it tomorrow on YouTube. So please, if you haven't liked, subscribed onto Imran's channel, please do join us tomorrow at 7 o'clock UK time. I think you're going to find it interesting, everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be good, bro. Also, as you mentioned it while we're waiting, the project or the meadow, that was a new one that, you know, you introduced me to. And, you know, it's after looking into it a little bit, it's really fascinating, the stuff that's going on there. So maybe you want to sort of touch upon it a little bit now.
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, there's a question I'm going to ask to Ronnie when he gets on. It's kind of related to the location wise. One of the interesting things I noticed when doing like some background reading, watching a couple of documentaries into like not just Skinwalker Ranch, but the whole phenomena of high strangeness in certain locations in America, it seems to center around what we would commonly call Native American lands. And I found that very interesting because that also seems to be reflected globally as well. So here in the UK, there's a couple of places that has a lot of high strangeness. One of them is Avebury Circle, going back to the megalithic period, Neolithic period here in the UK. There have been numerous accounts of orbs, UFOs, the strangeness. Like when I went to visit Avebury a couple of months ago, literally there is a pub, a club next to it that is well known for having some of the highest levels of paranormal activity within the local community there. In a couple of months' time, next month, probably a good opportunity for us to announce it to everybody. The IREP team is going to be doing a field trip investigation to Bempton here in the UK. If you don't know about Bempton, it is the British version of Skinwalker Ranch. You have cryptids, you have UFOs, orbs, high strangeness. Interesting thing about the local area, kind of within the local distance, there's a lot of Neolithic sites that are there. There's also another place called Danes Dyke, where cryptid dogmen creatures have been seen by the local community. That is another Neolithic construction. You also have another place there called Starcar, that's essentially a British equivalent of Göbekli Tepe, another area that's had a lot of high strangeness to it. So yeah, it's going to be a good deep dive tomorrow, preparing us for the eventual field trip we're going to be doing next month. And yeah, hopefully we're going to go up there, get some good footage. Everybody's going to like that one.
We've got Ronnie. He's joined us. So maybe, Afak, you want to give him...
I did. Ronnie, if you can accept the mic, you're welcome to the stage. I think he's still setting up, I guess. So let's see.
Yeah, Busla, sorry, carry on, bro, if you want, until we get Ronnie on.
So like I say, you know, hopefully we're going to be doing a good deep dive into it tomorrow. Hopefully there's going to be a lot of information we're going to be bringing out. And it just so happens, doing some research into, like I say, areas of high strangeness. I discovered one actually here in London. It's in the London Borough of Barnet. Not really going to mention too much about it, because hopefully that might be another trip that we're going to do for the IREP team, but it's here in London, and it's reported to have UFO sightings. It's also reported to have orbs. And like I say, it's literally here in London, really interesting place. So definitely, hopefully we'll be heading there as well.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. So Ronnie, welcome. You can unmute yourself, my friend, if it's all working fine.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can. How are you, sir? You good?
Okay, good. First of all, sorry about my delay. I had a delayed meeting in my job, so I had to enter only right now. But thanks for the invitation.
Not a problem. Not a problem at all. Thank you so much for joining us. We've all been really excited to get you on. We've been following your work over the past couple of months. Most of the people here probably already know your work in Brazil. You know, Ronnie is a investigative journalist in the UAP UFO space. He's been going, I believe, since 2018, if I'm not mistaken. He's made some brilliant documentaries. One of his original documentaries was, well, in English, you could say, Phenomena in the Amazon, Indigenous Encounters of the Locals. And his more recent documentary as well, which is very interesting, titled A Face, or the Dark Side of UFOs in Brazil, which I believe he goes or dives into the occult links to the whole UFO UAP phenomena. He also has a background in physics. Ronnie, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I believe you've got a master's in physics as well. So you bring your engineering and physics background to your research as well. So thank you for coming on. You know, we really wanted to hear from you. I know you've looked into the Virginia case as well. We haven't heard, or many people don't hear of your perspective on the case and other such cases across Brazil. So we want to really explore your thoughts today, what you've looked at, really sort of pick your brain and get as much information as we can from you. And you know, we're looking forward to you enlightening us in regards to the whole topic from your perspective. So what I'm going to do, Ronnie, is I'm going to pass over to Abu Salahuddin. and he's going to sort of, you guys can have a discussion. And then after maybe 30, 40 minutes, we'll open up to Q&A from everyone as well. So yeah, without further ado, Abu Salah, if you want to unmute, and guys, let's get started.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay.
It's finally good to meet you, Ronnie. I've been watching quite a few of your different interviews with some of our compatriots here in the UK. Watched the trailer for your documentary that you did into the Virginia case. So yeah, just really kind of like getting a little bit background to you. Can you tell me, like, what was your initial interest in really getting into the whole investigation into the UAP and the NHI phenomena?
Yeah, it started in 2018, but much before that, I watched many documentaries, because in Brazil in the 90s, where I grew up, we had many documentaries focused on the Brazilian encounters, Varginha and Chupacabras, the animal mutilations here, mainly. We also had the Operation Prato, Operation Saucer in 77, where the Air Force participated. We had the official UFO night in 1986, where all our airspace were invaded by the UFOs, and our Air Force had to send the jet fighters to pursue that. So we had many impressive cases of close encounters in Brazil, both with entities and also with the vehicles. And we had many in the 90s, mainly we had many documentaries and materials about that. So I grew up in this environment, curious about that, but never investigated nothing until 2018, 8 years ago, when I heard that some cases were happening near where I live. I live in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So these cases were happening in the rural area, and I started to do some field investigations and started to see interesting things. Basically, I started to see orbs in different colors, mainly white, yellow, and red orbs, and in very close distance, close to the ground. And at that time, I was 100% certain that this phenomenon was real, it existed. So I started to dive more, studying it, until in 2020, I obtained documents from the Brazilian government about the cases in indigenous villages in the Amazon forest, mainly in the state of Acre, which is very close to the Peru, the another country. And then I started to do more and more field investigations, until that I was able to, in 2021, had my first close encounter with an entity, humanoid entity. And this entity was not like what we normally see people describe. It was a shadow entity. It was completely black, but humanoid. His body was not static, it was very fluid. And this entity appeared exactly on a cross. We have a big statue of a cross in this isolated place where I did my field investigations, and three entities came out of a light. So a orb appeared, a golden orb or a yellow orb appeared, and from this orb, three entities like that, very tall, very black, very fluid. They came through this light. It appeared very close to me. I was completely scared at that time, but was the first time where I did a connection between the religious and the occult, the spirits, because it was not something that came from the space. It came from the ground in front of this cross, and it did not seem to be something technological, something extraterrestrial, something advanced, but instead it was really scary and more spiritual. So I started to have some links, and this was interesting because in 2021 in Brazil, in June, sorry, it was the peak of the deaths of of COVID pandemic in Brazil, and all the people in Brazil at that time, this specific moment, was very, very sad, was very, very afraid, and we have this kind of collective consciousness, very, very negative at that time. So I think maybe this is one of the reasons why I saw these entities. It was the first and the last time I saw this type of entities. So this passed, and in 2023, I was invited by the Chilean Catholic University, a professor and the students of engineering and other areas, to do some field investigations in the Atacama Desert in Chile. And at that time, we had encounters with luminous humanoids. I mean, completely different from that dark ones that I saw 2 years before. And these luminous entities were not aggressive or was looking at us. It was not threatening us like these dark ones were at that time. So a different type of entity, a different type of behavior. And again, it was close to the ground, did not came from the space. It basically appeared out of nothing. And this was the last time that I saw these humanoid shapes in 2023. So in 2024, finally, I was contacted by journalists that indigenous people were having close encounters in the same state where these encounters happened, where I obtained the documents. For you have to have an idea, these documents that I obtained in 2020 was about they were talking about attacks. So luminous phenomena was attacking people. They were attacking, causing many physiological effects on people, mainly in young girls. So the phenomena seems to have, like in Operation Prato, Operation also the phenomena where also we had attacks. The phenomena in these indigenous villages, they preferred the little girls to attack, what is interesting and also at the same time terrifying. And but in 2024, I had this call from the journalist. I was able to go there very fast. In 3 days, I was there in the village. Many people helped me, and I was able to have close encounters also with these orbs there. Again, red and orange orbs, not entities, not humanoid entities like these last ones. And at this time in 2024, the phenomenon was not attacking people. The phenomenon was just kind of observing them. So a different behavior. And I was able to get many, many images of these orbs in close distance. And this is available in my documentary. It's free on YouTube. It's called Phenomena in Amazon, as you said before. Phenomena in Amazon, Indigenous Encounters. If you type these words, you have the documentary, and we have English subtitles, so you can watch it. And finally, in 2025, I was able to start the end of 2024 to the beginning of 2025. I was able to start investigation about the Varginha incident, because people say to me that in that place where the creatures were get by the military, that same place, that same forest where they were captured, there was a very rich guy, a farmer, and an entrepreneur there, that he did black magic rituals. And I was very interested by this story. I talked with the first researcher of Varginha, which is Dr. Ubirajara Rodrigues, and Dr. Ubirajara told me that at that time, 30 years ago in 1996, he had received the information that some guys in that same place did some black magic rituals to open portals, and from these portals, many creatures were able to get out of this portal. And the guy was very mad because he couldn't close this portal. So this information from 30 years ago was in the same direction that this new information that I received, that some guys were doing black magic rituals there to open portals to summon creatures. And I spent more than 1 year investigating that. And this culminated in my documentary that is The Dark Side of UFOs in Brazil. Until this incident, I was suspecting some link to the occult and to the religions and to the rules, but there was not much 100% accurate about it. I had many doubts. And when I started to investigate that, at the same time, I had the hitchhiker effect in my home. It was the intelligence behind it. It was not liking that I was investigating this from this path of the occult, and maybe it was trying to scare me. So, for example, in one event, the cover of my bed was completed covered by drownings, strange drownings like goat head, symbols, and all stuff that you can imagine. It was scratched. It was not. It was drowned by a very very sharp knife or nail, and other stuff happened. Also, some equipment in my home. Some electrodomestics were in some equipment were starting to fail, to have electrical problems. I was seeing also some dark shapes sometimes that passing very fast, some strange noises. So this is what I passed when I started to investigate the Varginha incident. And I was able to confirm that, in fact, this rich guy was doing black magic rituals. Some of these rituals were there until these days because people are very afraid to touch it. So they were there. And these rituals involved the sacrifice of animals, maybe sacrifice of humans. I don't know. I could not confirm that humans were used in these rituals, but I suspect that. And what is interesting is that I received the information that this guy that was doing the rituals, he had a demon in a bottle. And I was very curious about that. I was doubting, but very curious. And in my last 2 months of investigation, I was able to speak with 3 different people that don't know each other. And out of 3 confirmed that this guy had this little demon in a bottle. It's not like this demon that we see in the drownings, what was very different. It was like a reptile, a humanoid reptile, very little, and the eyes were were cat eyes, like the eyes the cat have, and the eyes were red in color. And this was the entity that this guy, it was the god of this guy. Everything he wanted in material power, he was able to ask for this entity. And the guy prayed for this entity, and 3 different people confirmed this and saying that exactly description of the creature they saw. And this was very impressive because I was questioning if it was possible, but today I think it's completely possible to do that. We have this in many in the mythology, in many religions, in many cultures, about this genie in a bottle, this demon in a bottle, the familiar spirits. In England, Italy, you have in Spain this possibility to have this familiar spirit that you can summon and close this entity in a bottle. And also I was able to interview many people that saw different types of creatures, even before Varginha. In this investigation, people that saw many hybrids between humans and animals there, all of them with red eyes, but with different descriptions. Not the same like Varginha, the brown one, but different types. For example, beings that were mixed between reptile and human, a wolf or a dog and a human, and so on. And many people, I was able to interview many people that was even attacked by these creatures there in the same place in 1970s, in 1980s, 10, 20 years before Varginha. So this investigation were very interesting because it made me reflect that maybe these creatures were being summoned and not simply visitors from outer space, and summoned using occult rituals, black magic rituals. And I believe that sometimes we have places like that where people did rituals in the past, and this information kind of stays in the place, and these creatures manifest until these days there. Not like that way in Varginha, where all the people in the city saw the creature, but manifest for some people, and sometimes people could see that. And this is what I've been researched in these years, and how it culminated in my interest to do the link between the occult and the NHI.
Wow, really, really interesting. That is a really good introduction, Ronnie. Kind of a quick, there's a couple of things you mentioned. I just kind of want to maybe tease out a little bit more information from you. One of the things that we found within IREP is there seems to be like a lack or I would say not a willingness to kind of maybe look at other perspectives and ideas on the whole phenomena and the origin of it. So kind of bringing it back to Brazil, what have you found, like with the local indigenous communities, like what are common patterns that you have found with their interaction with the phenomena? Because I think this is kind of really illustrated as well. If we look at like north of the border, we look at America, the Native Americans have their own kind of stories about Skinwalker Ranch. They have their own stories about Bigfoot and so forth. But yet these stories are never picked up on. What did you find from interacting with the indigenous peoples of the Amazon? Was there commonalities? Was there patterns that you found that interconnected with your own investigation of the phenomena?
Yeah, the indigenous from the Brazilian side, they were not used to have this type of sightings in the past, but in the Peruvian side, we have indigenous from Peru that had many encounters with these entities, and these cases culminated in the creation of the Peruvian Air Force body of investigation in the anomalous phenomena. But the indigenous from Brazil and Peru shared information, and indigenous in Brazil knew they had these encounters, and we have these stories about the Pela Cara, or the face pillar, and other stories about other entities as well. But in Brazil, it never happened until 2014. About 10 years ago. So this is something new for them. What's interesting, a pattern that I can say to you, is that the indigenous from Peru were very, 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 they used it to do ayahuasca rituals. They consume these two plants. It's called the ayahuasca tea, and they drink this ayahuasca tea, and they had this altered state of consciousness, so they can contact these entities that they call spirits from the forest, to have their advice, to help them, to guide them. And in Brazil, it was not very common. It's common only in some places, but in Peru, they were doing it a lot. And when they start, I think the pattern is that when the Brazilian indigenous started to use more ayahuasca, and some indigenous villages were able to reintroduce this culture of the ayahuasca that they had lost in the past. When they introduced that they started at the same time to see these entities. So I believe the use of ayahuasca and these psychedelics experiences were maybe responsible to poke in this alternate reality where these beings live, and this intelligence started to manifest in our reality because of that. So it was like this use of psychedelics could open portals for them to enter our reality. And also another pattern is that when these indigenous started to invite people, not indigenous people, to visit there to do tourism. These people also started to see these entities, so maybe the presence of non-indigenous people there using also ayahuasca, it was something, and bringing problems from the city, for example, to the indigenous village. Because when people go to the indigenous village to use ayahuasca, the non-indigenous, they go to receive like a cure for their problems. And sometimes I think that they can bring some bad and negative experiences there, and maybe this could be responsible to bring these attacks to happen there. So this is what I think is happening, and I think this ayahuasca consumption and the presence of non-indigenous people there to have these spiritual experiences were responsible to have these manifestations there.
Yeah, you just mentioned something so interesting. That even like here in the UK, across the globe, like a lot of people are using DMT, which is just another I think it's one of the compounds of ayahuasca, and they all report the same kind of, they call them DMT entities, like the very typical alien grey. I don't know if you saw it a couple of years ago. There was an interview with an Amazonian shaman, and he was asked specifically about, you know, do you believe in life on other planets? And they couldn't quite understand it. But the hosts showed images of alien greys, and they said, oh, yeah, we recognize these. They live underground. We see these all the time. So there does seem to be a kind of a link in with the indigenous peoples there. And the DMT, what they're seeing, the experiences is, yeah, interesting. Just very quick, because I know that you was able to get information from the Brazilian government. In your perspective, what do you think is the most overlooked piece of evidence when it comes to understanding the phenomena?
Well, I think the most compelling evidence will have these creatures captured. I have no doubt that the Brazilian government, together with the US government, captured at least 2 or 3 creatures here. And I think this is the most compelling evidence. If we could have in US this document from Virginia obtained, because certainly we have an agreement with US about these creatures. We cannot say anything until US says first. So I think if we could obtain this document from Virginia, from the US, it could be a game changer, because I think this is the smoking gun evidence about that.
Do you think that there would be any high likeliness? I mean, now that there's kind of like this pretense of disclosure going on with the Trump regime, do you think that perhaps that would push the Brazilian government into release that information? Or do you think it's still very much the Americans will be the ones to decide if that information comes out from the Brazilian government?
I think it's more probable that the US release Brazilian documentation first, or Brazilian information first, because of this agreement. But all this movement inside the US can trigger a movement also in Brazil, and I think this already happened. We had in March of this year a military police, because in Brazil the police is military. The police here is commanded by the Brazilian army. So we had a state police here, same state of Varginha, the city of Varginha, and we had the state police here of Minas Gerais, this name of this state. They authorized the commander to speak in an official event about 26 encounters with beings. So this military police in Brazil had 26 encounters with luminous beings and also brown beings like the Varginha being. And they were authorized by the command to speak about that officially, in an official way. So I think this is the most important time in Brazil about this topic, and more military are coming forward after many years. To have an idea, in Brazil, the last military that came forward was William G. Holanda, commander of Operação Prato, in '77. He came forward 30 years ago, and after came forward, he committed suicide, unfortunately. And in 30 years, we had no military coming forward, and now we have dozens of military coming forward from these encounters with entities. So I think this is the U.S. movement is already influenced in Brazil.
What I was going to kind of ask next is because you've kind of indicated, like, for you with your investigation, the information you've come across, you know, this is not a quote unquote extraterrestrial phenomena. What do you see it as? Is it an ultra terrestrial, interdimensional? We know that's something now that is coming out of the American government, that this is some kind of interdimensional entity. For you personally, what do you think it is?
If you look to the Varginha beings, they were very primitive. They seem to be a hybrid between a human and an amphibious. So I don't think they were very advanced technological beings. Even people that entered and have in Brazil many cases where people entered this craft and had these encounters. And people says that when they entered the craft, they saw very primitive things. For example, very old screens, sometimes old buttons. In a lot of incidents, these people were able to fight hand to hand with these beings. So what doesn't make sense if they were really advanced? These abduction experiences, people experience pain. People experience these sexual relations, what I don't think make any sense, again, to be technological advanced beings. For me, most of them are very primitive beings, most animalistic beings, but they were maybe commanded by some incorporeal entity, and they were doing executing some kind of job. And in the religious way, they could be demons for the Christians, or jinns or rakshas for the Hindus, because they have the same behavior of manipulation, shape shifting, and also and see this phenomena in a scientific perspective. For me, it's make more sense if this could be some kind of AI. Imagine if you have an AI that was able to have access to your three-dimensional printing machine. So these incorporeals, these non-physical entity, were able to make presence here by using this 3D printing machine. But suppose this entity has access to a more sophisticated way to do here, it was able to manipulate reality. So if you have a being that doesn't have a physical body and is able to manipulate reality, it would be able to create anything he wanted here. Not created out of nothing like God, but create using the existing elements. So basically a constructor in a subatomic level, a quantic level. So maybe this is some kind of artificial intelligence with access to quantum manipulation of the reality. And if you see this intelligence in that way, we can do many links with many religions about these incorporeals intelligence that were able to create these illusions here, and not only illusions but material evidence. And in the Western society, I think this is a taboo, because when we talk about this spiritual realm or something like that, people think this is a completely invisible world, but it's more real than that. This world is able to manifest physically here, and I think for the Western society, it's very very difficult to digest that.
In-
So I think this is what the phenomena seems to part of the phenomena seems to be. I don't exclude that the phenomena can also part of the phenomena could be also something coming from the something physical coming from the ocean, for example. And you could have a situation where I have many types of intelligence here. But I think great part of what we are seeing is something incorporeal, something not physical, interacting with our physical worlds, something coming not from other planets, but coming from here in another reality. Imagine if the Earth could be an onion, that you have all these layers of this onion, and these layers could interact. So maybe we have a physical layer here, and these beings are coming from a non-physical layer. This is very discussed in physical theories. Physical theories about, for example, brain world, the extension from the string theory. So maybe something like that is happening.
Interesting. I know that yourself and Imran have been exchanging information, and last week I was lucky enough to catch a video that you've done where you kind of covered the Jinn hypothesis, and there's a couple of things there that you mentioned, particularly about the phenomena being around water. The phenomena seems to be very good at building, and it has these very extraordinary abilities of what seemingly are mind manipulation, sight manipulation, telepathic abilities, the ability to materialize in and out of our existence. In all of the cases you've kind of investigated, do you think that a lot of them, some of them, kind of do fit in with the Jinn hypothesis that we do promote here in IREP?
Yeah, I think the Jinn hypothesis is very good to explain that. Very interesting. Because when you go, I'm Christian, but when you go to the Christian scriptures, they don't detail these different types of beings. They say, okay, there are angels, there are demons, and they can manifest in different shapes. And it's okay. They don't explain nothing about them. I think that is a reason for that. Maybe they acknowledge that these were very powerful beings, and they don't want to awaken any interest in people about to study them. But I think the Jinn hypothesis is very interesting because they correlate with the different origins of genes of fire, genes of water, for example. And to have this happening in these environments in the world, to have this associated sightings of UAP in the volcanoes, we have in the forests in Brazil, we have also in the water. Most of the phenomena that was seen in the Operation Saucer in 77 in Brazil were coming from the rivers. Many people say that some mutilations that were done in animals in Brazil were made by beings that came from the water. And this interpretation of genes for me is interesting because of this link between these entities and the different elementals of the nature. And maybe in fact what's happening something like that, to have these some types of beings that are not material, but they can materialize using these elements from the nature as a medium to do that.
Interesting.
So maybe some
Okay,
kind of
Mhm.
that's happening.
Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie. Yeah. Imran, you have a question. What I'm going to say is, Imran, if you've got any questions, and then maybe afterwards, Ronnie, we could pick up, because I want to ask you some specific questions kind of related to the Virginia case. The reason being is because there is, and I'm not going to mention the name of the individual that has also produced his own documentary on the Virginia case, but yet very conspicuously, the kind of stuff that you've investigated is not in his film. But yeah, Imran, let me hand it over to you. And then after you've sort of spoken to Ronnie, we'll pick up and we'll speak a little bit more about Ronnie's film. which is The Hidden Face of Virginia, Power, Money, and Rituals. We'll talk a little bit more about the Virginia case. So Imran, please do pick
Yeah,
up.
no, thank you so much, Ronnie. This is fascinating stuff. You know, hearing it from your own personal objective investigations into Brazil. And a lot of the stuff you're saying is new to us as well, but at the same time, it's helping connect many dots. So thank you for sharing that and being open with this, because like you mentioned, this angle or this perspective or this type of objective study of the phenomena, very few people in the modern secular world are doing, because like you said, the aspect of the unseen, the spiritual, people don't want to entertain this stuff, the paranormal. They don't want to entertain this stuff. They want to look at the nuts and bolts, the physical stuff, etc. So it's commendable, and thank you for sharing that, and you know, going wherever the evidence was leading you. I also wanted to just mention that you mentioned something earlier, that you noticed that people were engaging in black magic and rituals where people were seeing these entities. Even in the Virginia case, that there was a guy conducting these rituals, and before these, or around the time these entities emerged. You see the very same pattern in America with the first flap of UFOs. You had Jack Parsons, who was engaging in rituals, the Babylon workings in the Californian deserts, trying to open up portals for these entities to enter in. So again, very similar as we're seeing in the Virginia case and in Brazil in general. And I think that also is a very interesting link with the jinn, one that I haven't mentioned in the written work, but now that you mention is very interesting, which is, if you look at it historically, if you look at through history in the Arab folklore, the Arab writings, etc., the jinn were always invoked by magicians by doing rituals and practices. So this was the means that they would try to contact these beings and benefit from these beings, or try to use them for their own worldly material gain, like you mentioned. So I thought that was another interesting link as well. But back over to you. I don't want to disrupt the conversation. Please carry on, guys.
So I would say, everybody, please, if you haven't subscribed onto Ronnie's YouTube channel, please do it. Although a lot of the videos on there are in Portuguese, they are dubbed into English. Please, you'd really benefit from them. I highly recommend, please do subscribe to Ronnie's channel. You can watch the video there on the Virginia case that he did. So interesting. And as I kind of indicated a moment ago, Ronnie covers stuff that the big investigators are either deliberately ignoring, they didn't know, but the fact that Ronnie's investigating and find out shows me the evidence was there. So that maybe brings in some other questions. But what I would say though, Ronnie, for you personally, what was that link between Virginia and the occult? What was that initial link for you that made you, or took you down the rabbit hole and led to, it seems, people trying to conduct satanic rituals against you?
Yeah, I was in a city that was neighbor of Virginia, and I started to talk with some old guys there. They were just chilling in front of the church, and I started to ask, "Oh, do you know something about Virginia?" And I think it's not coincidence. The first one said to me, "Oh, you need to." I was in the hospital there. I was working the construction of the hospital, expansion of the hospital, in fact. And I was there working, and I saw these boxes made of wood that the military were bringing to inside the hospital. I didn't see the creature. I see the boxes that probably had the creatures inside. And he said to me, "If you want to know the truth about this incident, you need to investigate this person, because this person has the key to all the truth about it." I had never heard the name of this person before, so I got very interested. And this was the person that was doing these black magic rituals. And logically, I don't have any 100% proof, or I'm smoking an evidence that this guy was responsible for bringing these creatures of Virginia to the reality. But it's a big coincidence that we have this guy in this that owns this property where the beings were encountered. That's a forest, and this guy was the owner of this land where the forest is there. and the beings appeared exactly at the same place where this guy were doing rituals. So this is a big coincidence. This guy is already deceased, so there is no way to ask him about something about that. But I interviewed many people that worked for him, that from his family, many people in the city that knew him, and all of them confirmed, and also was able to visit his old house where the rituals are there until these days. So we have all these rituals, we have this incident, all in the same place, and I don't really think this is a coincidence. And all of that, together with the fact that this guy had this little devil in a bottle, as the witnesses, all the city of Virginia know about the story that this guy had agreement with the devil, a pact with the devil, and he was able to summon this creature in a bottle. And all this city know this story better than including the Virginia alien incident. And but they were not able to confirm, and that, as I said, I was able to confirm with three different people in the last months of investigation. So I think we have many data points that this really happened there. And as you said about the documentary of James Fox, the documentary is very good. I liked it. I just don't agree with the fact that these beings came from a craft. I don't blame James about that because this is the original story. He's covering the original story. I also don't blame Marco Aurelio, his producer and main researcher, because again, this is the original story. This is a story is 30 years ago happened, and they were telling what the original story was. But if you see the guy that said that a craft um, landed there, the craft that was retrieved there, this guy has many contradictions. This guy said at least 3 or 4 versions about what he saw. He's the only one that saw in the daylight. I don't think a craft will crash in the daylight, and only he would see that. I don't believe that. The ufologists were in this land many times and were not able to collect any piece of metal there, any tiny piece of metal. They use detectors. They use anything that you could imagine in the in there to try to detect. Also, so I think this guy is lying. It's Carlos de Souza. It's the main witness about the craft. I think he's lying for some reason. I don't know why. I cannot say that, but maybe he's compromised by the Brazilian army, because Brazilian army wanted to pay a lot of money for the mother of the girls, for them to dismiss what they saw, and they didn't accept that. And maybe the army was able to give money to other people to send this information about that. And if you see this land where the was alleged craft crashed, this land is very far from the place where the creatures were encountered. But again, for me, it doesn't make sense. And I think this was created to uh, get the attention of people. So to say to the ufologists and researchers, okay, you have this land where the craft crashed, very away from the land of the beings were encountered, just to have this misdirection to the ufologists. Oh, don't come here where the beings were encountered because we don't want you here. Go there where the crash was happening. So I think this is the reason this crash story appeared. The other two witnesses about alleged craft is a couple, and but this couple didn't saw a craft. They saw a kind of fog moving close to the ground, a dense fog, and this dense fog, after 3 or 4 interviews, was transformed in a craft, a metallic craft. What's very, very imprecise is you get the first interview of this couple, they say it was a smoke. And this is interesting because the two main materializations paths that I see of this phenomena, and we saw many histories in Brazil, many stories in Brazil, are first fog, a fog that becomes very dense. The fog that becomes very dense, in a second step, becomes luminous, becomes light, and from this light, these crafted beings can emerge. So I think this is and it's very, very similar to what I saw in 2021, the materialization of these dark figures. And I think this is the main path for the materialization of these beings in our world. The orbs, and before the orbs, this kind of dense fog, a dense smoke. And also we had in Brazil in the 60s, we had close encounters with a Brazilian general of Brazilian army called Moacir Shoa. He was able to get journalists, politics, military colleagues, dozens of people to witnesses the summoning of entities. He did it at a very isolated place in the middle of Brazil, close to the capital, and they were able to do at least a dozen of summon sessions of these entities that he called beings from hyperdimension, from hyperdimension, so hyperspace and so on. So these were beings that came in a smoke, in a dense fog again. So I think this is this is what happened for me in Virginia. That I cannot prove that obviously, but I think there's more logical way to think what happened there.
So amazing. I mean, you're hitting so many points there that we have also found commonalities. Say, for example, here in the UK, I'm sure you're familiar with the very famous Rendlesham case in 1980. What a lot of people don't know about the Rendlesham case that we found through investigating, and I believe it was one of the soldiers that was actually sent into Rendlesham Forest, that he said clearly that they caught people in Rendlesham Forest undertaking some kind of ritual. A couple of hours later, supposedly there's a UFO that lands. And then there's kind of very contradicting stories. They talks about orbs floating around. They talk about a craft that landed, and supposedly in a farmer's yard, these entities literally materialized through the walls of the craft and were interacting with the American soldiers. What is really interesting, when we did a little bit more of a deep dive into the locality of the Rendlesham Forest incident, it's in an area in the UK called Suffolk. The deputy, I believe it's the deputy commander of the actual airbase there. His name's Lieutenant Commander Charles Holt. He called the area Suffolk, he called it an area of witchcraft. What's very interesting, in 1980, I believe it was in 1995, a very famous experiment took place called the Skull Experiment. Are you famous with it, Ronnie?
Yes, I know that.
Yeah, so obviously the Skull Experiment takes place that allegedly is about, proving life after death, but yet what they end up seem to be doing is capturing on video images of what we would call alien greys, but essentially these beings were blue. They called them blue. What's very interesting is that Skull Village, where these essentially occultic rituals were taking place, is literally an hour's drive away from Rendlesham Forest. So there seems to be a really big commonality going on here. But one thing I'm interested in is, in your time, have you come across any official documentation from the Brazilian government where they do speak about or mention occultic practices that took place, whether that is the police, the military, or something like that?
No, the closer we have about that are these encounters from this Brazilian armed general, that in fact he
Hmm.
summoned them. They did prayers to make them appear. Um, and I think this is the closest thing we have in Brazil about that, not in documents, but in these experiences that are in the books of this general I read this season.
Hmm. What for you was the kind of most surprising element that you discovered around the themes of power, money, and rituals? I mean, is it literally they're summoning these beings to become rich? Presidents, I mean, we have cases, you know, of these esoteric groups. Everybody probably knows in America about, you know, Bohemian Grove, where people go there, do ceremonies and stuff. So what for you, kind of like, why are they summoning these beings? What is it they're getting from them?
Yes, I found that is a network of people. This guy was one of these persons. All of them are very rich and powerful in the locally, and this network extends probably about many cities and states in Brazil, and they share information about that. And these rituals are made basically first to know everything that's happening against and pro them, everything that people are doing against them. For example, this guy knew anything, everything about it, and also to gain power and money. And these are the main purpose of these rituals.
Have you found that, obviously, as you're saying, that there's like a network of these individuals? Have you found that it's this network of very influential, occultic, very probably power hungry people? Have you been able to identify any organizations that are essentially trying to put out a different narrative or to shape the narrative about Virginia?
Um, I think in partially, I think that, as I said, there were people suited in very well dressed that offered money to many people there. Some of the people probably accepted that, and we just don't know what are these people. But I think this happened, and they basically doesn't want people to talk about it. And this could be a religious people, group of people. This could be the government itself. This could be these guys that did rituals there, because maybe they know that people talk about that. Maybe we had consequence. If we can, with words, summon, and with intention, summon something. If all people, a collective consciousness of people in a city talking about that, and a collective consciousness in people in Brazil talking about something, maybe this have some powerful effects in our reality, and maybe these people know about that. So this also happened in the church, the local church in Virginia. The priests wanted to dismiss the subject. So I think I have many groups with knowledge about this phenomena, and with different intentions about that, different perspectives about it.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's one of the things that seems to be coming out now, even with kind of the disclosure that's going on in America. You have obviously Nick Redfern spoke about the Collins elite that kind of seem to have their own agenda in, number one, in suppressing the information that comes out, or definitely controlling the type of information comes out. Have you personally, since you've kind of gone down this road and you've been able to make this definitive link between, you know, these entities, satanic occultic rituals, have you personally found that they've put pressure on you, maybe your distributors, they've tried to, you know, tarnish your name? That has happened to some people that have essentially brought out something that seems that they want carefully hidden, and that is the occultic kind of paranormal side of the phenomena.
Yeah, I had some groups of Satanists trying to perform defamation against me, attacking me, and I know them very well. I know what these people because I researched about them, and I think because when you talk with people that only study the occult, we have an understanding that it's impossible to materialize things. They saw things, for example, in a mirror. They saw entities in the crystal, in the water, but they say that you cannot materialize a being, for example. But I believe that we have many groups that have access to materials and to experiments that these low-ranked people that are only basically students or beginners, they don't have access. And I think we have maybe a network of very, very powerful people that knows the real knowledge about the occult, and they are able to do the thing. So I think this is what could be happening, because if rituals and intentions simply summoned beings, we could have these beings everywhere in Brazil, because Brazil we have at least 10% of the population. We have many African religions here. We have different types of religions that do rituals, and at least 10 to 20 million people in Brazil are doing rituals right now and to summon entities, and we don't see the Varginha incident repeating every year. So I think these are very, very specific types of rituals, very specific knowledge, very hidden knowledge. And also, I don't think there is only one factor explaining that. I think we have the current level of consciousness of this city of Varginha, for example, what's happening there at that time, the environment. I don't think that there is only one factor that could explain what happened there.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, it's we know from, you know, when you start investigating into the phenomena, you know, you do begin to see certain familiar names. One of them, probably, I'm sure you're very aware of, is Aleister Crowley. He goes to the Great Pyramids in Giza, goes into the King's Chamber, where he says this entity, I believe, called Lam or Awas. There's some confusion over just exactly who he was speaking about. But if you look at the imagery that Crowley drew of this entity, it essentially looks like an alien grey. One of the things I'm interested in, and this has happened in Europe, and it's one of the areas of the phenomena that a lot of people seem unwilling to talk about. But I think I've heard you mention it in Brazil. And that is not just the cattle mutilations, but the human mutilations that have taken place. Because it seems as though these entities, as you say, not everybody's summoning these entities through, you know, going down to their local Amazon and ordering a book on how to conjure entities. But there seems to be these entities want a particular price to get their help, support, their influence. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the human mutilations that have been going on in Brazil.
Yeah, I think sometimes we are summoning involuntarily these things, not necessarily doing these types of rituals. I think this phenomena could be manifested because of the collective consciousness of people in a local, for example, either very positive or very negative. It could maybe able to summon these things. I think the consciousness is the key to understand the phenomena. The conscious maybe is the key to summon these things, and not necessarily because what is a ritual? If you get deep in what's a ritual, basically ritual is a exercise of intention, a very exercise of faith. You have faith that doing these ingredients, saying these words, this will happen. You don't have any doubt about that. And I think that this basically, so a ritual basically is an exercise of intention, exercise of faith, and I think with faith and intention we could change the reality, and maybe this is why sometimes we have these beings in places where not necessarily people did rituals there, but for example, if people believe, they have faith that the things will not be better, that the world is very negative, that we don't have any chance to revert that. Maybe this could be a door to these things to enter our reality. And I think this and if you think about that, these beings could be, if the real intelligence behind that is something non-physical, you have and you want to interact with our world, you would have some kind of ways to materialize. Here is something that physically is very very expensive. You need a lot of energy to do that. No matter how they are doing that, they would need energy to materialize something here. And I think this is the last way they manifest. And the first way would be influencing humans, maybe to have to put ideas in the head of humans is much more energy efficient than materialize. Second, you could have also these materializations, and you have these mutilations. First, if you get these rituals where people do sacrifices, they were doing sacrifices for some entities, they're offering blood for these entities, and maybe this is something that can feed them to enter our reality. And sometimes these beings itself, they were able to gain energy and materialize here and do these mutilations themselves. So I think sometimes they are just influencing people to do the mutilations, and sometimes these beings were getting energized and they could materialize here and do the mutilations themselves and become stronger and stronger. So this is a cycle that could be, I think this is a cycle that could be happening about the mutilation. Sometimes we have these black magic rituals doing dirty mutilations that we see clearly that a human did that. And sometimes we had this type of procedures that are very advanced, like did by a medical surgeon. That's the anomalous mutilations. And I think these anomalous mutilations were made by non-humans. And this is the cycle that could feed them so they could be able to be here.
Interesting. I'm going to hand it over to Imran. Imran, I'm sure you got a lot of questions. Just a very quick observation, Ronnie. You said something about how the intention of the individual, the human, can kind of lead to a catalyst of their manifestation. It's very interesting. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Actions are by intention." So if you kind of have that intention to contact these beings through like abilities of maybe telepathy, they can pick up on that and they can kind of zero in on you. But I'm going to hand it over to Imran. Imran, please do jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask too many questions because I know we've had Ronnie on for over an hour now, so I'm cognizant of his time as well. But I would like to invite him, maybe I'll message him later, to a YouTube podcast whenever he's available. But I do want to ask Ronnie one more question. What he said was really interesting, that these entities, because it's so energy efficient to engage on a psychic or psychological level, inserting thoughts and ideas into people's minds is easier than to manifest into our physical plane. Now, this is an idea me and Farouk discussed in the last podcast, and it seems to be the case if you look at it from a theological Quranic perspective, that these entities give waswas in Arabic, which is whisperings into the minds of people. They put ideas into the minds of people, negative ideas, so on. And that seems to be the preferred mechanism. And our speculation is that maybe, like you mentioned, to manifest physically and impact people, it's not as energy efficient, it takes more. We have a working model, and I know Ronnie has a physics background, so I do want to get his thoughts on this. Based on an etymological study of the Quranic texts in regards to the nature of what we call the jinn, and they're known by many names in many cultures, it seems like And now we don't have the time to get into this to explain this here, but I could send you the details, Ronnie, later on via message. But it seems like from our research that these are a type of plasma-based entity that has the ability to control the electromagnetic spectrum to a degree by which it can manifest into our physical plane. So go from a plasma state to a physical state. Exactly how it happens, I don't know. I'm not a physicist. Does it require energy? I think it does require energy. And also, so I want to get thoughts on that. Does that type of speculation make sense from a physics standpoint? How would you think of that? And the second follow-up to that is, it seems from the, again, Islamic tradition or text, it seems like that when these entities manifest, when the jinn appear in physical form, they seem to be susceptible to things other physical entities are susceptible to. So, for example, if a jinn or one of these entities is in a physical form, they can be killed in that form because now, for all intensive purposes, they're biological. So that may be another reason as to why they may not like to manifest as much physically. But I would like to know Ronnie's idea in regards to the plasma. Does that type of idea make sense? Any sort of thoughts he has in regards to that?
Yeah, this is what makes the gene explanation one of my favorite in the theology. This, what you mentioned, that when they manifest here physically, they are able to be killed here, and it's like they are very thirsty. They are very thirsty to have this energy, and they are attracted here to mutilate these animals to get blood, for example. And this could be a trap for them, that because they could be killed. But sometimes this thirty could blind them. They are completely blind about their desire to have this material, that they come here, and when they have power to do that. And this is why maybe we have these aliens captured in some or killed in some times. Um, about physics, what I can say is that I don't think they were plasma in a physical way, because the best explanation of plasma, the best example of plasma, is the lightning bolt. The lightning bolt is something with a huge electromagnetic energy, and that makes a lot of noise, that emanates a lot of radiation. And I think some of these phenomena, okay, could be that, but most of it, they're like shadows. I'll give an example. I had close encounter with orbs, and these orbs are physically like shadows. I can see this huge light, but this huge light cannot affect my eyes. What doesn't make sense? This huge light doesn't have any noise. What doesn't make sense for a plasma? This huge light do not emit any ultraviolet or infrared or ionizing energy to affect my body. What again doesn't make sense. So I think maybe some kinds of phenomena could be more technological. Maybe something that's coming from the water, from the sea, that's more technological and could emit radiation and can affect people, like what happened in some cases. But other part is something emanating from other universe, from another reality. And the physics have theory about that. The theory about that is more close to that, the brain world theory. The brain world theory tells that we can have many realities, many 3D realities that connect to each other through something called bulk. So we could have this 5-dimension bulk that connects many 4-dimension realities like ours, three dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. And this theory contemplates that the gravity itself could flow between these realities. And this could explain why, when these beings are present, or this phenomenon is present, sometimes people experience anti-gravity, sometimes people experience electromagnetic effects, because when you have interactions between these, we have some deformation in this book, which would be the real reality, I could say. When you have these interactions between our world that's physical with this other world that could be non physical in this book, we could have these manifestations of different types of effects caused by the gravity and the electromagnetic effects, because this theory says that all these different types of realities, they have different types of physics. So, and what is shared between these worlds is only the gravity. So maybe have strange effects that we could not even explain, because it's not our physics data, it's physics from their world. and and maybe what this is what could explain why people get paralyzed, why people perceive different notions of time, why people see a different gravity field there, why people see these electromagnetic effects. It's maybe this is the collision between worlds, and when have this collision between worlds caused by consciousness, this could maybe explain why you have these effects physically.
Brilliant. Brother Farouk, you have a question? Please do go ahead for Ronnie.
Sorry, was that it cut out there? Did you say me?
Yeah, go ahead, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick one. I know you've been on for a while. Thank you, Ronnie. Appreciate you coming up and sharing with us today. It was fascinating, eye-opening as well. It's always good for an amateur researcher like our group to find that someone else has come to similar conclusions. So, you know, it is quite reinforcing to we're kind of doing the right thing on our side. I just have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. The first one is, and this is slightly off topic, but it's regarding possession phenomena. Have you come across possession phenomena? Are there any reports, not necessarily just specific to Virginia, but in general, in your research, have you come across people who have suffered with possession phenomena?
Yes, it's very common in Brazil. It's interesting. What's interesting is that in this possession, the priest sometimes can put the entity away, and sometimes they cannot. Some priests say that some entities are not evil; they are just tricksters or deceased people. So the exorcism ritual in these cases doesn't work very well. And what's curious is that the Catholic Church or the Christians doesn't acknowledge the existence of deceased people, deceased souls, or tricksters. They only acknowledge the existence of humans, angels, and demons. And this is contrary what the practice of these priests are telling. So I think we have many different types of entities here, and this is and a lot of people that were possessed, they practiced occult rituals, or they are succeeded uh, to a familiar ritual that was done to, for example, to gain power, to gain money. Sometimes these fathers and mothers, they sell the souls of this child, their sons, and they manifest these possessions also. Um, and this is the last stage in the control of people. Sometimes people were having dreams, and they authorized the things to enter. They started to contact these beings, and they wake up with injuries, with scratches, with marks in the body, and they continue to accept that. They start to manifest possession, what's the total control of the body. So this is what, and people started also giving more power to these entities. They start also to see these entities physically. So I think the possession is something that we could use as example to how they operate. They start to give ideas. They start to appear in dreams. They start to appear physically in a more partial way, doing these injuries, and they start to control and appear physically in the last stage.
Mm-hmm. This is, I think, in the West they've give it the term hitchhiker effect, but there's a spectrum of that, right? And as you mentioned, this dreams is something which even we have in our tradition, that the these creatures. I know you pondered on the electromagnetic as brother Imran said about plasma, but put aside because I think it's a lot more nuanced than just using a modern term like plasma to align with what the jinn are created from. It's their essence rather than their specific creation. Like the human being, we're made from mud. Or a mixture of different types of mud, or you could go further than that and the carbon, as you like. But in reality, we're much more than that. You know, we're a living creature. But put that aside. Going back to the possession phenomena and the way that they affect dreams and other sort of manifestations within the body, physical manifestations where the human body's taken over, where people speak with a voice and in a language that they're not familiar with. I've dealt with a case, well, I wouldn't say dealt with, but I researched a case. I traveled up north many years ago. There was a young girl, she was a teenager, and she was speaking Arabic. She can't speak Arabic. She's she you know, she can speak English and part of another language, but she had no idea what Arabic was as a language, yet she was speaking fluent Arabic. It was classical Arabic as well. It's not, so it wasn't a modern accent, and she had no memory of these sort of outbursts, and she spoke like a man. We got it on video. She had you know, sound like a male voice coming from her, speaking Arabic. Very bizarre, but she had no memory of it. And this is a classic. It's a classic symptom of the phenomena, is that people who have certain events, whether it's an abduction event or a you know, they see something and then they lose time, or they call it time loss, but really it's memory loss. They've lost their memories regarding that moment, just like that young girl who had possession. So this is part of the manifestations of this one creature. And the dream aspect, the Prophet Muhammad's peace be upon him, he told us dreams are of three types. One is from the one above, the Lord. These are dreams that are beautiful dreams, maybe religious or pious in nature. They make you feel good, so on and so forth. The second is a dream related to the daily activity. So you may spend the day eating ice cream, and in your dream, you dream about ice cream, you know, for example. The third type, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, was a dream from a shaitan. Now, what's unusual about this is that it shows that these creatures have some dominion in what we would call the dream realm. I'm only using that as a terminology to separate it from the waking world, right? I don't know if it's a realm itself, or whatever is occurring during our dreams, it happens within the mind. So we're asleep, laying in our bed, yet we have these experiences that are not related to just being stuck within the room we're sleeping. You can dream about all sorts of things. You can dream about flying through the sky, visiting different places. You know, many people who have had experiences dream about UFOs, dream about abductions, so on and so forth. So the Prophet peace be upon him said that you can. They have some effect on our dreams. They can affect our dreams. They can give us evil or bad dreams, where we wake up feeling scared or afraid. And it has an emotional effect on us, and they do it for entertainment. You know, they find it funny to wind people up and do these sort of things to us. With that in mind, because of the nature of the dream, or shall I say, the state in which the mind is during a dream, those who have mastered hypnotism and things like that, we can place the mind into these dreamlike states. It goes into the works of people like Paul Harrick, who discuss and looked into being able to place visions and images into people's minds, and that could be done through hypnotic type suggestion, putting mind into dreamlike state things. And once you open that door, you are vulnerable. This could also be related to how and why drugs have such an effect. And people say, I open the door to another reality, but it could be just putting the mind into that state where you're opening it up to the vulnerabilities that come with the dream state. That and these creatures can affect that. They can put, you know, images and events into your mind that are not actually happening. But I find it fascinating that, you know, this is cross culture. Everywhere you go in the world, there's a culture that has possession phenomena, and we've over the centuries, whether it come from religious doctrine or folk medicine, we've found ways to try and deal with these possession incidents. And one of the last thing I want to mention, one of the symptoms of the possession phenomena is not only is it memory loss, but it's also psychological problems. And that's why often people who are suffering with having psychological episodes and have mental illness, but it can sometimes be the mental illness is a symptom of a possession. Not all of them, by the way. I'm not saying that like anyone who's got has mental health issues has a JINN problem, but it can be that a JINN problem causes a symptom of mental health. So but
Yeah,
appreciate that. Thank you
I
for
think
answering.
the main way they operate is through mind influence and mind control. So this makes sense about what you're saying. I think this is the less energetic way for them to operate and to influence us. I think they don't want to appear because when they materialize, they are proving for other people that they exist. And the biggest weapon they have is that people doesn't acknowledge that they exist, and they don't want that. As I said, I think they materialize only when they are blind, and they don't want that. The best way to operate like an intelligence agents here to manipulate us would be the hybrids. I think if they could have these human beings with their software installed on them, like a chip, like an implant that can control people. Because when you talk about the possession, they don't have the ability to possess people, all the people they want. This is a process. This is a lengthy process to have these people in possession. They have to pass for many barriers to do that. So I think the best plan for them they are doing is the hybridization, because when they have a human that have their implant inside them in the brain or something like that, they could control these people every time they wanted. And these people, they are human in appearance. They could not be uh, detected by other humans, for example. So I think this is the final way they could operate here, and maybe we have these hybrids here, and we just even don't know. Maybe some governments, some politicians, people in power, maybe some of them are real hybrids.
I want to mention something. Many years ago, this is like mid 2000s. I had a friend of mine. He's a imam. He's like a priest, the Islamic version of a priest, right? So he was a local imam, and he had a young man who had some issues, and the family had said, "Look, we think that he's been possessed. There's something wrong with him. He's behaving strangely. He's not behaving normally." It's not very common, right? I'm not saying that like every Tom, Dick, and Harry has it, but we get quite often. You get a lot of people who say they've got an issue, and it's not. It's just a psychological problem they have. There's no possession, right? But this particular case, the imam, he said this person was truly suffering. When they were trying to treat the individual, as is known, sometimes these voices come out from the people, and this voice, this creature, the jinn, it claimed, and this was very bizarre, like this is mid 2000s, it claimed that it worked for the CIA. Very bizarre statement for something during a religious healing ceremony where people were doing what we call ruqya. So it's like reciting, and as well, I can't remember what the Christian what do you call it again when
Exorcism.
Exorcism, thank you. Yeah, they were doing reciting the Quran and reciting the verses related to healing, and when this creature spoke, it claimed to work for the CIA and it had been sent by the CIA. And all these years later, all this information about the CIA and the types of programs that they worked on, related to strange and anomalous effects, whether that be through MK Ultra, or whether that's from I forgot the name of the project when they were the men who stare at goats. What was the name of that project? Does anyone remember? Someone might write it in there.
You're talking about, is it Operation Stargate?
Stargate. Thank you very much, brother. Yes, Stargate, Operation Stargate. It rings true. This sort of bizarre incident where this creature's claiming it's been sent by the CIA. Now at this stage, like anything goes, man. It wouldn't surprise me if they have their own sort of squadron of these creatures that go out and do their bidding. And as is known, one of the worst things that they do to human beings is this incessant nagging of thoughts. So if you can imagine someone who's suffering psychologically, and all he's getting in his head is, take out this president, harm him, harm him, harm him, harm him. So all day long they're trying to get on with their job. Let's say they're a mechanic and they're tightening the bolt, but in their head they've just got this constant reinforcement of doing harm to XYZ, and that's he deals with it for a month, 2 months, 3 months. Eventually they have a psychological breakdown and they go and they harm somebody. Right, this is the type of behavior that these things do to people. So it's a kind of, as you said, it's like a kind of control. They may not be able to take over the whole thing, but they corral people with an assault on the mind. Not always is it a physical manifestation or a craft in the sky, but it can be an assault on the mind, and it's incessant. And you see it as well in this particular topic. People become absolutely obsessed after seeing something, and they're chasing shadows for the rest of their life, and they never get the answers they're looking for, and they spend the rest of their life obsessing. And you go to see them and all they want to talk about is this one thing, and they don't really, their life stops at the moment they had their experience, and they are living in that moment for another 40, 50, 60 years. It's very sad. Takes people over, and
Yeah, I think the U.S. intelligence, they're maybe in Russia, in China, they studied a lot the possessions, and they cracked the process. So if they are able to concentrate in a place and do the psychic espionage about this place, maybe they were able also to concentrate and focus on a person and try to control the mind of this person. So and even if they have some access to some artifacts that they found in this crash retrieval process, and I think Steven Spielberg is giving some hint about that in this last movie, when you have this guy that used non-human artifact to amplify these capabilities of psychic powers. Maybe they are able to do that. So maybe something like that's happening. Guys, I really have to go right now because I will travel.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank a lot for this conversation. I learned a lot today. I'm very interested to know more about the Islamic teachings about these jinns and other beings. So maybe we can do a part 2, and I can participate whenever you want. We can schedule that. Okay.
Yeah, definitely, Ronnie. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, man. And yeah, we do these every Friday. So whenever you like, you're more than welcome. Jump on and enlighten us with more information. I'll message you later regarding the podcast as well. Have a good day. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing all of the information.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Brother. Be safe. There we go. That was a very eye-opening conversation with Ronnie, and it was a pleasure to have him up here. And thanks, Imran, for arranging this and bringing it out. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. I'm also going to go. I didn't want to.
Let's wrap up. Let's wrap up. I guess.
Yeah,
man. It's getting late.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
I'm going to say my salam to everybody, and peace be upon those who follow right guidance. May we be guided to what is good for us in this world and the hereafter. Thank you, Aquila, Icon, HK Neon, Gordib, Susan. Welcome, Susan. I'm not seen you here before. Dr. Ash, regular, Jenny, Cool Picture Jenny, Khalid, Afaq, the Anon, Christoph Frost. Thanks for coming back, buddy. Nice to see you again. Kensei, Blue, Abu Salahuddin, Ronnie, Imran, myself, and IREP. Thank you, everyone. I'm gone. And take care, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you
You
for
guys just
joining
want to
us,
wrap it up here,
everybody.
or?
Very quickly, thank you for joining us, everybody. Remember, please do tune in to tomorrow's YouTube special. It's going to be myself, Brother Imran, and Farouk. We're going to be doing a deep dive into Skinwalker Ranch. Once again, thank you, Ronnie. Such a good conversation, so enlightening, a lot of information. Definitely looking forward to having you back on again. So that brings us to an end of another Friday IREP X Space. Please, everybody, do look after yourselves. And remember, these can't hurt you. Put your trust in God. They can't trouble you. See you all next Friday. Have a great weekend.
All right, take care, guys. Thank you.